I call the honourable member Darian Fenton.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair, and thank you. It's an excellent choice. Thank you to the member for that. That's right. It's been a very, very interesting discussion in the committee stages of this bill, and I've been listening as I've been working in my office, and as people have been talking about silos and their experiences with the state sector. And I wanted to remind my colleague Trevor Mallard that one of the things that he tried to do, I think, when he was State Services Minister. You were State Services Minister? I was. Yes, I remember one of the things he tried to do was to get the Chief Executive together and do a simple thing like having common leave provisions across the state sector. And there was enormous resistance to that, as I understand. It was the most difficult job because the Chief Executives could not get their heads around doing something together. They were all precious about their departments. They all thought that they should just have the direct say on whether their staff should have, I think it was 4 weeks annual leave then. They didn't actually want to be...
Sometimes they have 4 weeks and a day.
Okay.
For this reason or that, they're all bloody different.
Yeah, they're all bloody different, as Trevor Mallard just said. All the leave provisions were different. But it was such an enormous job for a very sensible proposition. And I would have thought that that would be something that chief executives in the state sector would embrace. Actually, that they would actually they'd embrace that. And so I'm not convinced that this bill, Mr Speaker, will actually change that culture. And if anything, I think it's got worse. But I should say that I am pleased that we've made progress on this bill and that we have got to a point where we can support it. And I am pleased that part of the hard work done by the Labor members on the committee and in negotiation with the national government has ended with a conclusion where we can accept, I will say it's not perfect, but we can accept the changes made, particularly around redundancy entitlements and workforce policy statements, that where the Chief Executive, where the State Services Commission cannot interfere in wage bargaining. I will say again, Mr Speaker, as I said in one other speech about this, though I do find it very confusing that on the one hand we can get the government to a point where they accept that redundancy and redundancy entitlements are fair for public servants, and we on this side of course think that's very right, but they don't think it's fair for other workers who work outside of their state sector, and they continue to oppose basic redundancy entitlements for all workers throughout New Zealand. They've done that through a bill that I brought to the House as a member's bill, which is now back in the House under the name of Sue Moroney. They will continue to oppose that. So I get confused about the conflict that there seems to be in the government's mind about they can have one set of rules on the one hand for public sector workers, but it's not good enough for other workers throughout the country. And the same goes for collective bargaining, actually, because there is an acceptance in this bill that collective bargaining is a good way of reaching agreement across the state sector. But then on the other hand, we have Simon Bridges' bill to completely undermine collective bargaining for all workers, including state sector workers as well, Mr Chair. So it is a very I get very confused about the government's messages, and I think that it's not only a silo mentality in the state service, but a silo mentality among ministers, where they don't seem to be able to bring their policies together, and they have some alignment between them. And it's a little bit like that with the Employment Relations Amendment Bill as well, and the health and safety reforms the government's bringing through. Health and safety reforms are great, but then on the other hand we have the same minister bringing forward reforms that will completely undermine health and safety by reducing workers' rights. Talking about silos too, I also heard my colleagues talking about Moby, that mega monster, that creation of Stephen Joyce, which he has put together, which is gradually being taken apart. And I, like my other colleagues, never saw why the Department of Labour, a department that we've had dedicated to workforce policy issues and workplace relationships for more than 100 years. For more than 100 years we had a Department of Labour in New Zealand. That has disappeared and been swallowed up into Moby, and it's even hard to know what to call it anymore. I think the inspectors, the miserable 35 number of labour inspectors that we have throughout New Zealand, still call themselves labour inspectors, but there's no resemblance in Moby to that wonderful... Mr Chair,
The Honourable Member, Darian Fenton.
They may well be Moby inspectors, I'm not sure, but all I do know is there's only 35 of them, and they're supposed to enforce labour rights for all workers. Well, we're meant to be more health and safety inspectors, and that's another matter, because what's happening now is that Moby and the Department of Labour part of that is being unwound as the government is forced to set up a new agency for health and safety. And it started this brave new world on the 1st of July, Monday this week, where there were supposed to be more than 150 health and safety inspectors in place in this Lifting Our Game program that they have been going through, yet another restructure, which has become known as shifting the blame by the health and safety inspectors, because it's been a very disgraceful, one of the worst restructures and botch-ups that's ever been seen. And the Minister agrees with me. I can see him nodding. It has been an absolute botch-up, this restructuring that's gone on. And so what we have in place is 74 inspectors, less than half of what we had 2 years ago. So that gets back to, I mean, here we are creating a Crown agency for health and safety and moving over the health and safety enforcement part or direction part of Moby, or what used to be the Department of Labour. But the transition is awful. The transition is awful, and it's scary as well, because how on earth are we going to make sure that people are kept safe and healthy at work in the next 12 months while the new Crown agency is established? So, you know, they're gutting the Department of Labour part of Moby, and it's getting smaller and smaller, and I really have to wonder whether what its purpose is. And I do wonder actually if that is the real agenda of the government, is to actually not have anything like a Department of Labour, not have anything that is responsible for making sure that workers' rights are enforced, making sure that employment legislation actually works. And of course, what we find, because they're so short of resources now, they can't even tell us, for example, whether the legislation this government has brought in around employment rights actually works. I asked a question the other day about the 4 weeks annual leave that can be cashed up the other day, and the other changes that were made in 2010. The department has done no research on that. Now, how can a government and a department in the state sector bring forward legislation and bring it in and argue it and push it through because they have, the government has the numbers, and then do no follow-up to see if it's actually working? If there's a problem, they can't even tell us if there's been any complaints about it. Now, this is shocking. This is shocking. And so, while I'm pleased that we've got to a point, Mr Chair, where we can support the bill because of changes that were made during the Select Committee process, I think it's, as I said, it's not perfect. There's still some issues here. I'm not convinced that this is going to change, first of all, the government's attitude to making sure that people are provided with the proper information and the proper policy and guidance. But second of all, the attitude of chief executives, because as I started out by saying in my contribution, Mr Chair, chief executives under Trevor Mallard's time openly resisted changes that we were trying to make around having common leave provisions. And I also know that they openly resisted collective bargaining, which was a policy of the Labour government, which was part of our legislation. They openly resisted it, and they refused, and still to this day refuse, to include wages in collective agreements. That fight has been going on for 10 years because chief executives came out of the 90s, have an ideology, don't believe in collective bargaining, don't believe wages should be included in collective agreements, and that battle is still going on 9 years later. Now, what I can say, if we're the government next year, that will change. That will change. It is not acceptable to have direction from a government and have so much resistance because of the particular ideology of a state sector executive. So, as I said, I don't believe this will change the attitude. I think it's good that we've got to a point where we can vote for it. I do think there are ongoing problems in the state sector. I'm looking forward to seeing what develops with health and safety. I'm looking forward to Moby and the old Department of Labour now recommending there should be an inquiry into forestry safety after last night the forestry owners came out and said they supported one. There's some good advice that they could get and be given to the Minister, and he should be acting on that today.
I call the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta. Tēnā koe, kei te pihiko.